Welcome back to the Storm Fitness Academy podcast, and in today's episode I'm going to be explaining how cardio training actually helps your clients. Now if you're not a PT, don't worry, this is still going to be super interesting, because if you're a fitness enthusiast or someone that would love to be a fitness enthusiast but just haven't quite found your mojo for exercise, hopefully this is going to get you a little bit pumped when I talk about all the wonderful benefits that you can get from cardio training. So let's dig in. Now, first of all, straight in there, we've got cardiovascular adaptations. Now, that word cardiovascular, you probably associate that with getting out of breath, going to your spin class, going to your running club, getting on the rowing machine. And yeah, they are definitely cardiovascular exercises. And this word cardiovascular basically means heart and blood vessels. So those adaptations are all specific to do with the heart and the blood vessels. And that's one of the great adaptations we get from exercise. So the first one we have is it strengthens our heart. Now, I think everybody probably knows that, don't they? When we do some cardio, we get a stronger heart. But specifically, what's happening is your left ventricle. So as you're looking at the heart on somebody else, it's their left side. So the left of their heart is getting thicker and stronger. So cardiovascular training is a little bit like resistance training, weight training for the heart. So when we do lots of bicep curls in the gym, our biceps grow and get bigger. When we do lots of cardio, our left ventricle grows and gets bigger. Why is that a good thing? Well, having a stronger left ventricle means it can pump more forcefully and get more blood around the body with each contraction. Now, when that happens, we get an increase in stroke volume. Now, you probably think, what does that mean? Never heard of that. Well, what stroke volume is the amount of blood that your heart can pump with one contraction or one beat. So let's say that your heart can push out 50 milliliters of blood with one contraction or one beat. With training over time, that could go to 75. What does that mean? Well, it means it's pushing more blood around the working muscles, and there's loads of good stuff in blood that we like. We've got nutrients, we've got oxygen, we've also got carbon dioxide, which we're trying to get up to the lungs to remove, but we're going to come to that later. So there's lots of good stuff in blood that we're transporting around the body. If we get an increase in our left ventricle, we get an increase in our stroke volume. So this is a good thing. Now, obviously, if that's going on, we're going to get a lower resting heart rate. Now, you might have a friend who is an endurance athlete. Maybe they're a triathlete, or they're always out running, cycling, and they're always bragging about how they've got a low resting heart rate. Well, that's because they have a higher stroke volume. So from their training that they've been doing for their endurance sport or activity, they've increased the size of their left ventricle, that's increased their stroke volume, and that in turn has reduced their resting heart rate. Now, typically, most people, their resting heart rate sits between 60 and 80, or if you took the average, it's about 70. So if you've got a resting heart rate that's below 60, you can probably safely say that you have got a good conditioned heart. Now, there are exceptions to the rule. Some people are naturally just born with a larger heart, so they'll have a lower resting heart rate anyway. Some people are born with a smaller heart, so they might have a higher resting heart rate. But generally, having a low resting heart rate is a good reflection of cardiovascular fitness. Now, we talked about stroke volume, but also if our stroke volume goes up, our cardiac output goes up as well. And cardiac output is how much blood your heart can push around the body within a minute. So the easy way to work that out is your stroke volume times your heart rate. So if we're pushing more blood around the body in a given time frame, we're delivering more oxygen, more nutrients, we're getting rid of more toxins and flushing out carbon dioxide that we don't want flooding our system. So again, this is a good thing. Greater stroke volume, reduced resting heart rate, increased cardiac output. All good stuff. And the other thing we get is more capillaries. So capillaries are teeny tiny blood vessels. So you can't actually see capillaries without looking at them under a microscope. So we have arteries, we have veins, and we have capillaries. So they're so small, they're 1 cell thick. And the reason they're so small is we need oxygen and carbon dioxide to diffuse through the wall of the cells. So they're allowing oxygen in and they're pushing carbon dioxide out. So it's what we call gaseous exchange. So we get the oxygen and then we breathe out the carbon dioxide and we give that to the trees and the plants. Now something else we get is an increase in our blood volume. So we actually get more blood, and that's a good thing too, because inside blood we have red blood cells, which are amazing for boosting our endurance performance. Red blood cells carry oxygen, and the whole point of cardiovascular and endurance performance is to get oxygen into the body and turn that into energy. So if we've got more blood, we're going to be carrying more red blood cells, which are going to be carrying more oxygen, which means we're going to produce more energy. More great stuff. All right, let's move on to respiratory adaptations. So when you hear that word respiratory, you can think about lungs. So one of the first adaptations we get is breathing becomes slower and deeper. And this happens at rest and during light exercise. So you probably remember when you first started exercising that certain activities would get you quite out of breath. And then over time, you found you weren't getting out of breath. So it might be just going for a brisk walk with a friend. You know, you're finding really out of breath, especially when you go up a hill. And then eventually you can just chat away, finding it quite easy. And this will occur at all levels. So there'll be a point where, you can even start running, but then you become out of breath. But then over time, you can run whilst maintaining a conversation. So breathing becomes slower, so the frequency reduces, but you actually take longer, deeper breaths and get more oxygen in, more air in to the body. Now, of course, with all this stuff, your lung function improves as well. So your lungs get better at extracting that oxygen out of the air and delivering that to the blood. So the lungs function really is to take the carbon dioxide out of the blood and then exhale that from the body, and to take the oxygen out of the air and deliver it to the blood. And it gets better at doing that. So within the alveoli, which are the very small air sacs within the lungs, we have those capillaries that we mentioned earlier, and they are responsible for that gaseous exchange. So they get better at doing that job, which in turn delays fatigue, not just during sport, but just during day-to-day activities. So how's this going to help clients? Well, if your client plays a sport, then it's going to help them build stamina and endurance, which means they'll be able to run around on that court, run around on that pitch without the limiting factors of fatigue. Now, even if your client doesn't play any sport, they are still going to notice that they get a reduction in their breathlessness in their day-to-day life. So it doesn't matter what the activity is, if it's running around with the kids, gardening, housework, they are going to feel less breathless when they're doing those activities. Now, it's also going to promote long-term heart and lung health. So heart and lungs are significant players in maintaining longevity. So if clients are exercising regularly, exercising their lungs, working on their endurance and their cardiovascular fitness, then they're likely to reduce their risk of premature death by 20 to 30%. They'll halve their risk of heart disease and type 2 diabetes. So there's a ton of health benefits to get from working towards improving your endurance. Now, of course, there is a ton of evidence and examples that aerobic exercise helps to normalize blood pressure. So often if somebody's got stage 1 hypertension where it's, the blood pressure is slightly elevated, just engaging in regular aerobic exercise can bring that blood pressure down to the optimal range of 120/80. And it's also been shown to be really, really good at helping to prevent or manage obesity for numerous reasons. Now, obviously, it's helping to increase the calorie expenditure, which with a controlled calorie diet or a balanced diet is going to help to create a calorie deficit, which will help the person lose weight. But it's also going to give that mental health boost that helps you to think more positively and just make better food choices. So there we go. So there's tons of stuff to talk about when it comes to cardio training. So if you're training a client and you haven't got any kind of cardiovascular activity planned into their training program, then it's definitely something you want to consider. Now, if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you really like this type of content, you're going to love our courses. So head over to our website, stormfitnessacademy.co.uk, check out our course packages. And if you just want to get yourself started, start with our level 2 in gym instruction. If you know this is something you want to do as a career or a seriously good side hustle, then check out our personal training packages. Enjoy the rest of your day.